The ocean breathed against the shore, and I breathed with it, each exhale pulling me deeper into the ancient rhythm that lived in my bones. My bare feet carved temporary paths in the cooling sand of Edisto Island as twilight painted the sky in desperate shades of crimson and gold. Around me, great egrets moved like liquid grace through the shallows, their elegant necks arcing in a dance as old as the tides themselves. I am Kiona. Kusso blood runs through my veins, the blood of people who have called these Carolina Islands home for countless generations. My grandmother swore our ancestors could speak to the spirits through movement, that their bodies became vessels for prayers too sacred for words. I had dismissed it as folklore until the day I learned she was right. You need to update your routine, Kiona. Marissa's voice still echoed in my head from dance practice that afternoon, sharp with a captain's authority. The Coastal Festival is next week. These traditional steps are too primitive. The judges expect innovation, not museum pieces. The memory made my movements falter. I stumbled, my foot catching in the sand, shattering the fluid connection I'd been building with the elements around me. The competition mattered. To me, to our small community dance group, to everyone who had invested hope in our chance for recognition beyond this island. But something about abandoning my heritage felt like betrayal, like cutting away pieces of my soul to fit into someone else's vision. Your dance tells a story, my grandmother had whispered once, her weathered hands guiding my young arms into the proper positions. Never forget that story, child. It's who you are. I sighed, lowering my arms as the sun melted into the horizon. My shadow stretched long across the beach, reaching toward the dunes where sea oats swayed like dancers themselves. As I turned to leave, movement caught my eye. A figure seated in the sand several yards away, so still I almost mistook him for driftwood. An old man sat cross-legged, his dark skin weathered like ancient leather. White hair caught the dying light like spun silver. In his hands, a piece of driftwood traced intricate patterns in the sand around him. Not random designs, but symbols that made something deep in my chest tighten with recognition. I hesitated. My grandmother had taught me to respect elders, but also to be cautious of strangers. Before I could decide, he looked up, and his eyes met mine across the distance. They were impossibly deep, like still water reflecting starlight. "Don't stop on my account," he called, his voice carrying easily despite its softness. The egrets were enjoying your performance. Heat climbed my throat. I didn't realize anyone was watching. The birds approve of your mimicry. He gestured toward the shallows where the white forms continued their patient hunting. They recognize truth when they see it. Something in his calm presence drew me closer. As I approached, the patterns in the sand resolved into intricate symbols, spirals like shells, curves like waves, forms that resembled birds in flight. "What are you creating?" I asked. "Stories." His fingers continued their work, adding a delicate spiral that seemed to pulse with meaning. Sand remembers everything that touches it, you know. Some impressions last longer than their visible marks. My pulse quickened. "Are these Kusso symbols?" His eyes sparked with interest. "You recognize them?" "Some. My grandmother taught me a few, but she said much of our history was lost." The admission tasted bitter. The old man nodded sadly. Too much was lost, but not everything. He patted the sand beside him. "I watched you dance. You move like someone who remembers." I settled beside him, drawing my knees to my chest. "I'm supposed to forget, actually. My dance team wants me to modernize for the festival." "Ah." He nodded, as though this explained everything. "They want you to be like everyone else. They want us to win." But even as I said it, his words struck something raw inside me. The old man's fingers continued their graceful work, adding another spiral. "Dance for me, child. Show me what your heart knows. The request felt important in a way I couldn't explain. I rose, brushing sand from my shorts. The beach had emptied as darkness deepened, stars beginning to pierce the velvet sky. Cool air kissed my skin as I closed my eyes and let my feet sink into the sand. I imagined the egrets, the elegant curve of their necks, the infinite patience in their stillness, the purposeful grace of their movements. I raised my arms slowly, then began to dance. The steps flowed through me like water, movements passed down through generations, telling stories of survival, of connection to land and sea, of respect for the creatures sharing our world. I spun and dipped, my feet drawing patterns that mirrored the old man's carvings. Then something extraordinary happened. The evening breeze strengthened, swirling around me like a living thing. When I opened my eyes, I gasped. The wind had lifted fine grains of sand from the beach, and they sparkled in the fading light, forming spirals that followed my movements like golden ribbons. The sand danced with me, rising and falling as though alive, catching the last crimson rays of sunset and the first silver beams of moonlight. I wasn't just dancing, I was creating magic, forging a connection to this place and all who had danced here before me. When I finally stopped, breathless and exhilarated, the sand settled back to the earth, leaving only the impressions of my feet. The old man watched with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "That is your magic," he said softly. "Dance as you were meant to, and the world will follow." But how? My voice came out shaky. How did it happen? He shrugged, his shoulders rising beneath his faded shirt. "The world recognizes truth when it sees it. Your dance speaks truth." His gaze moved to the ocean, now a vast darkness broken by white foam. "There is power in honoring who you are, Kiona." My breath caught. "How do you know my name?" The wind whispered it. His eyes twinkled. "Or perhaps I heard someone call to you earlier. Does it matter?" It didn't. What mattered was the certainty flooding through me. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I needed to do. "Will you be at the festival tomorrow?" I asked. "I'm always around." His answer was enigmatic. "Now go. Your family will worry." I rose, brushing sand from my clothes. "Thank you." "Remember," he called as I walked away. "Dance your truth, child." I turned back to wave, but in the growing darkness, I could barely make out his silhouette. The coastal festival transformed Edisto Beach into a carnival of color and sound. Vendors lined the boardwalk, musicians played on scattered stages, and crowds of tourists mingled with locals under the blazing autumn sun. Our dance team gathered in a tent near the main stage, nervous energy crackling between us. Marissa adjusted her bright costume and checked her reflection obsessively. "Remember, sharp movements, big smiles," she instructed. "Kiona, you practice those new steps, right?" I met her gaze steadily. "I'm dancing my own way today." Her expression shifted from surprise to irritation. "We agreed on the routine, Kiona. This isn't the time for creativity." "I never agreed." My voice was quiet but firm. "And I think you'll be impressed with what I have to offer." Before she could argue, the announcer called our team to the stage. Marissa shot me a warning look but had no choice but to lead us into the sunlight. The crowd was massive. Hundreds of faces turned expectantly toward us. I spotted my parents and grandmother in the front row, their expressions encouraging despite the tension in their postures. The music began, a driving pop song Marissa had chosen for its commercial appeal. Our team moved in practiced unison, executing the choreography we'd rehearsed for weeks. I followed along initially, my body remembering the routine even as my mind drifted to the beach and the dancing sand. When my solo section approached, Marissa's nervous glance found me. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. Instead of the modern moves we'd practiced, I let my body flow into the traditional steps my grandmother had taught me. I extended my arms like egret wings and moved with the fluidity of water meeting shore. The pop music faded as I found my own rhythm, my feet drawing patterns across the wooden stage. A collective gasp rose from the audience. For a terrible moment, I thought I'd made a mistake. Then I noticed something extraordinary. The decorative sand arranged at the stage's edge began to stir. Fine grains rose in spirals around me, catching sunlight and transforming into shimmering ribbons that followed my movements. The crowd fell silent, then erupted in wonder and applause. I continued dancing, embracing the magic flowing through me, connecting me to this land and to ancestors who had danced upon it for generations. When the music ended, the sand settled into intricate patterns resembling the old man's symbols. The audience leaped to their feet, applauding wildly. Marissa and my teammates stared in astonishment. "How did you do that?" Marissa whispered as we took our bows. "I dance my truth," I replied, echoing the old man's words. After our first place victory, the judges citing innovative cultural elements and unexpected special effects, I slipped away to the beach. I needed to find the old man, to thank him for helping me discover my courage. But he was nowhere to be found. I walked to where we'd sat together and stopped in surprise. There, etched in the sand despite the morning tide that should have washed it away, was a perfect great egret with wings outstretched in flight. I knelt beside it, running my fingers along the design's edge. The sand felt cool and damp, but there was something else, a faint vibration, like an echo of heartbeat. "Dance your truth," the wind seemed to whisper through the sea oats. I smiled, understanding at last. The old man had shown me that strength comes from knowing who you are and honoring that truth. My dance was more than movement. It was connection to heritage, to this island, to the elements themselves. As the sun warmed my shoulders, I began to dance again, my feet leaving temporary impressions in the sand. But I knew now that some impressions lasted far longer than their visible marks. They became part of the land's story, of the people's story, of the magic that connected us all. Spring returned to Edisto Island 6 months later, bringing longer days and the promise of new beginnings. Our dance group had gained regional fame after the festival, and I'd spent the winter teaching my teammates the traditional steps passed down through generations of Kusso people. I walked the beach at sunset, a ritual I'd maintained since my encounter with the mysterious old man. Though I hadn't seen him again, I often found intricate designs in the sand. An egret in flight, a spiral shell, patterns that resembled his carvings. They always appeared where the tide couldn't reach them, defying explanation. The sky blazed orange and purple as the sun melted into the horizon. I slipped off my sandals and let my toes merge with the cooling sand, my body moving naturally into the dance, arms extending like wings as I traced patterns my ancestors had followed for centuries. Sand rose around me, swirling in delicate spirals that caught the dying light. This magic no longer surprised me. It had become part of who I was, a gift I'd learned to embrace. "I've been looking everywhere for you." I turned, sand settling around my feet. Elijah stood at the dune's edge, his tall frame silhouetted against the darkening sky. My heart quickened at the sight of him. Elijah had arrived in January to work as a marine biologist at the local research center. We'd met when he attended one of our performances, and had been circling one another ever since, our conversations growing longer, our glances more meaningful with each encounter. "How did you know I'd be here?" I asked, brushing sand from my hands. He smiled, walking toward me. "Your grandmother told me this is where you come to think." Of course she had. My grandmother had taken an immediate liking to Elijah, inviting him for dinner whenever possible. She claimed interest in his coastal ecosystem research, but I knew better. She'd been watching us with knowing eyes, hiding smiles behind her teacup when our hands accidentally touched. "I wasn't thinking," I said. "I was dancing." I saw. Wonder colored his voice. "The sand moved with you, didn't it?" I froze. No one besides festival attendees had witnessed the sand's response, and even they believed it was special effects. I'd never explained the truth to anyone. "You think I'm crazy," he said, misreading my silence. "No." I shook my head. "I'm surprised you noticed." Elijah moved closer, his footprints joining mine in the sand. "I notice everything about you, Kiona." The words hung between us, honest and unguarded. In the fading light, I could see his eyes, deep brown with gold flecks, warm as the sand beneath our feet. "There's a legend in my family," he said, never breaking eye contact. "My grandfather was Gullah, from St. Helena Island. He told stories about people who could speak to the elements, water dancers, fire keepers, sand weavers. I thought they were beautiful myths until I saw you at the festival." A gentle breeze stirred my hair, carrying salt and jasmine from the nearby dunes. "What did your grandfather say about these people?" "That they were blessed by ancestors, given gifts to protect the land and preserve our stories." His smile turned sheepish. "That's partly why I became a marine biologist. I wanted to understand the connection between people and this coastline. I had never met anyone who spoke so openly about such things, who understood what I was only beginning to discover about myself." A wall inside me crumbled. "Would you like to see it again?" The offer surprised me. Elijah nodded, stepping back to give me space. I closed my eyes, centering myself as I'd learned to do. The rhythm came from within, my heartbeat, my breath, the memory of drums that had echoed across these shores for generations. I danced slowly at first, each movement deliberate. Sand stirred around my feet, rising in delicate tendrils that caught the last embers of daylight. As my confidence grew, so did the sand's response, swirling higher until it formed a gossamer veil around me, shimmering with inner light that pulsed with my movements. I opened my eyes to find Elijah watching with undisguised awe. The sand responded to his presence, extending a spiraling tendril toward him like an invitation. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand toward the dancing grains. I nodded, maintaining my rhythm as he stepped closer. When his fingers touched the swirling sand, it shimmered more brightly, weaving between his fingers like liquid silk before returning to the pattern around me. "It's warm," he whispered in surprise. "It carries the day's heat," I explained, though I wasn't sure if that was true. I only knew what I felt when dancing. That sand retained memories of sun, moon, and the countless feet that had walked these shores. As the last light faded, I completed my dance. The sand settled gently, leaving a perfect spiral pattern around us both. Elijah stood motionless, wonder and longing playing across his features, a longing that echoed the feeling growing in my chest. "Thank you for showing me," he said softly, "for trusting me. I've never shown anyone before. Not like this." He reached out, his fingers brushing mine with the same gentleness the sand had shown. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? There's a place in Charleston I've been wanting to share with you." His touch sent warmth spreading through me, as if the sand's magic had transferred to his skin. I'd like that. We walked back along the beach as stars appeared, our shoulders occasionally brushing, the words flowing easier than they ever had. By the time we reached the boardwalk where my car waited, the moon had risen, casting a silver path across the water. "I'll pick you up at 6, he asked, as we paused beside my car. 6 is perfect." He leaned forward, hesitating only a moment before pressing his lips to my cheek. "Good night, Sandweaver," he whispered, his breath warm against my skin. I drove home with the windows down, letting the cool night air flow through the car, carrying salt and possibility. My grandmother sat on the porch when I arrived, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "You're glowing, girl," she said as I climbed the steps. "And it's not just moonlight." I couldn't hide my smile. "Elijah asked me to dinner tomorrow." She nodded approvingly. "About time. That boy's been looking at you like you hung the moon since he arrived." She patted the chair beside her. "Now tell me about your dance. The sand spoke to you again, didn't it?" I sat beside her, letting my head rest against her shoulder as I had since childhood. "It did. And Elijah saw it, Grandma. He understood." Her hand found mine, the fingers warm and weathered with age. "Some people are meant to see our magic, Kiona. Their souls recognize something in ours." She squeezed my hand. "Your grandfather was like that. He saw me dance with the wind when no one else could." "You never told me that," I said, sitting up to look at her. Her smile deepened, mysterious in the porch light. Some stories wait for the right time to be told. The next evening, I stood before my bedroom mirror, smoothing the fabric of a dress I'd bought in Charleston but never worn. It was the color of sea glass, neither fully green nor blue, but somewhere between, like the ocean on a clear day. The material flowed around my knees like water when I turned. My grandmother appeared in the doorway with a small wooden box. "You look beautiful," she said, her eyes bright with pride. "I have something for you to wear." She opened the box, revealing a necklace. A simple leather cord threaded through a chunk of polished driftwood no larger than my thumb. Carved into its surface was a spiral, similar to the old man's sand drawings. "This belonged to my mother," she explained, lifting it from the box. "It protects those who keep the old ways alive." I bowed my head as she fastened it around my neck. The wood felt warm against my skin, as if it retained heat from all the hands that had held it across generations. "Perfect," she declared, stepping back. "Now you carry a piece of the island with you." The doorbell rang, widening her smile. "That will be your young man." "He's not my young man, Grandma," I protested, though my racing heart suggested otherwise. "Not yet," she replied with a wink. Elijah waited at the stairs' bottom, dressed in dark pants and a crisp white shirt that contrasted beautifully with his brown skin. His eyes widened when he saw me. "You look incredible," he said, his voice soft with admiration. "So do you." I reached the bottom step, suddenly shy despite hours of conversation the previous evening. The drive to Charleston took us across bridges and through marshlands that glowed gold in the setting sun. We talked easily about his research, my dancing, the island we both called home despite arriving by different paths. Charleston greeted us with cobblestone streets and centuries-old buildings. Elijah led me to a restaurant housed in a former cotton warehouse, where exposed brick walls and wooden beams created warmth, while large windows overlooked the harbor. The hostess seated us by the window, where candles flickered in hurricane glasses, and the last daylight painted the sky in deepening blues and purples. "This is beautiful," I said, taking in the view. "I thought of you as soon as I saw it," Elijah replied, his eyes on me rather than the scenery. "The way the water catches the light reminded me of how sand moves when you dance." His admission warmed me more than the candles ever could. "You did?" He nodded, a slight flush darkening his cheeks. The resemblance was striking. Our conversation flowed as easily as the wine the waiter poured. Elijah shared stories of growing up in Savannah, of his grandfather who taught him to fish, and told him stories about ancestors who had lived on these islands for generations. I spoke of dancing with my grandmother as a child, of learning traditions that connected me to this place and its history. "I've been thinking about yesterday," he said as we finished our entrees. "About the sand and its response to you." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. In my research, I study how coastal ecosystems respond to human interaction. Most of my colleagues focus on negative impacts: erosion, pollution, habitat destruction. I nodded, familiar with these concerns from island living. But I've been interested in something else, he continued. Indigenous communities worldwide have practices that enhance rather than damage environments. Sustainable fishing, controlled burns, farming techniques that improve soil health. His eyes met mine across the table. What if your sand dancing is part of that tradition? A way of communicating with land that our ancestors understood but we've forgotten. The idea resonated deeply. Not that I controlled the sand, but that we engaged in conversation, a mutual exchange of energy and intention. The old man said something similar, I recalled. That sand remembers everything touching it, that some impressions last longer than their visible marks. Elijah reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. I'd like to understand it better. Not just as a scientist, but as someone who cares about you. The admission hung between us, honest and vulnerable. My fingers interlaced with his, the connection feeling as natural as breathing. I'd like that too, I said softly. After dinner, we walked along the harbor hand in hand. The night was warm, stars reflected in dark water alongside lights from boats and buildings. We paused by the railing, watching a sailboat glide silently toward the ocean. My research grant ends in September, Elijah said suddenly. I've been offered a position at the Marine Center in Beaufort. My heart sank. Beaufort wasn't far, about an hour's drive, but the thought of him leaving created an unexpected ache in my chest. That sounds like a great opportunity. It is, he agreed. But I'm also considering extending my Edisto research for another year. He turned to face me, his expression serious in the moonlight. I wanted you to know before things between us go any further. The implication that he might stay, partly because of me, made my pulse quicken. And what if they do? Go further. His hand rose to my face, his fingers gentle against my cheek. Then I'd have another reason to stay. When he kissed me, it felt like the culmination of a dance we'd been performing since we met. Each conversation, each glance, each shared moment leading inevitably to this connection. His lips were soft against mine, and I tasted salt and wine, an infinite possibility. The carved driftwood at my throat warmed against my skin as his arms encircled me. When we finally broke apart, his eyes held a wonder and desire that made me feel both powerful and vulnerable. We should head back, he murmured, though his arms remained around my waist. The drive back to Edisto was comfortably quiet. Elijah's hand found mine across the center console, our fingers intertwining as we crossed bridges connecting the islands to the mainland. The moon rose higher, casting silver light across the marshlands stretching on either side of the road. When we reached my grandmother's house, the porch light glowed welcomingly. Elijah walked me to the door, our steps slow as if neither wanted the evening to end. "Thank you for tonight," I said, turning to face him. "For dinner, for the conversation, for everything." His smile was visible even in the dim light. "Can I see you tomorrow? There's a place on the island's north end I'd like to show you. It might be perfect for dancing." "I'd like that." He leaned forward, his kiss gentle and brief, a promise rather than a demand. "Good night, Kiona." I watched him walk to his car, warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the mild spring air. When I entered the house, my grandmother had left a note saying she'd gone to bed early, and that tea waited in the pot if I wanted it. I poured the fragrant herbal blend, carrying it to the back porch where the ocean sparkled in the distance, a darker expanse against the night sky. The carved driftwood necklace still felt warm against my skin, and I touched it thoughtfully, wondering about the women who had worn it before me, about their loves and losses, their connections to this island. Sleep came easily, and I dreamed of dancing on the beach, sand rising in golden spirals, while Elijah watched from the shore, his eyes full of admiration and something deeper, something that felt like belonging. The place Elijah wanted to show me was a secluded cove on the island's northern tip, accessible only by a narrow path through dense maritime forest. We parked at a small lot used mainly by researchers and hikers, then followed the trail as it wound through live oaks draped with Spanish moss and palmettos that rattled in the gentle breeze. "I found this during a bird survey last month," Elijah explained as we walked. "It's protected from development because of rare shorebirds that nest here." The path emerged suddenly onto a crescent of beach, enclosed by low dunes and sheltered from the open ocean by a sandbar, creating a natural lagoon. The water in the lagoon was clear and still, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds like a mirror. "Oh," I breathed, taking in the pristine beauty. "It's perfect." Elijah smiled, pleased by my reaction. "I thought you'd like it. The sand here is different too. Finer, almost like powder." He led me to a flat area near the water's edge, where the sand was indeed different from the coarser grains of public beaches, pale gold, and so fine it clung to our feet like dust. "Would you dance here?" he asked. "I brought lunch. We could make a day of it." The cove felt sacred somehow, untouched and peaceful in a way that reminded me of the old man and his carved symbols. I'd love to. We spread a blanket on dry sand above the tide line. Elijah produced a small cooler from his backpack, unpacking sandwiches, fruit, and iced tea. We ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. His research, my upcoming performances, books we'd read, music we loved. After lunch, I stood and walked to the lagoon's edge, letting the cool water lap at my ankles. The sun was high, warming my skin as I closed my eyes and breathed the clean salt air. "May I join you?" Elijah asked, coming to stand beside me. "In the dance?" I hadn't considered that possibility. He nodded, his expression both eager and uncertain. "You could teach me some steps. I may not have your gift with sand, but I'd like to learn." The request touched me deeply. No one had ever asked to learn the traditional dances except fellow performers, and they saw them primarily as choreography rather than connection. "Of course," I said, taking his hand and leading him to smooth sand. "The most important thing isn't the steps themselves, but the intention behind them." I began with simple movements, showing him how to center his weight, how to extend his arms to mimic shorebirds. Elijah followed my lead, his movements initially awkward, but gradually becoming more fluid as his confidence grew. "Now we acknowledge the 4 directions," I explained, guiding him through a turn encompassing north, east, south, and west. Each has its own energy, its own meaning. As we moved together, I felt the familiar stirring of magic, the fine sand rising around our feet in delicate swirls, responding to our movements. Elijah noticed too, his eyes widening in delight. "It's dancing with us both," he said in wonder. The sand rose higher, forming patterns that seemed to merge and intertwine like our shadows on the beach. I'd never seen it respond this way to shared dance, and the beauty took my breath away. We continued moving, our steps becoming more synchronized, more fluid, as if we'd been dancing together for years rather than minutes. The sand followed, creating a shimmering veil that caught the sunlight and transformed it into countless points of golden light. When we finally stopped, breathless and laughing, the sand settled back to the beach, leaving a perfect spiral pattern that encircled us both, connecting us in a continuous line. Elijah looked down at the pattern, then back at me, his eyes alight with understanding and something deeper that made my heart race. He seemed at a loss for words. I know, I replied, equally moved. He stepped closer, his hands finding my waist. The sand recognizes something between us, doesn't it? I think it does. My hands rested on his shoulders, feeling warmth through his thin shirt. This time when he kissed me, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. His lips claimed mine with a certainty that matched our dance's sure movements. I melted into him, my body responding to his touch as naturally as the sand had responded to our steps. We sank to our knees in the spiral's center, the fine sand soft beneath us. His hands traced patterns on my skin that felt like extensions of our dance. Reverent, deliberate, infused with meaning and intention. Kiona, he whispered against my neck, my name becoming a prayer on his lips. The world narrowed to the space between us, the warmth of his skin against mine, the gentle pressure of his hands, the soft sand cradling us within the spiral we had created together. Time seemed to slow, each touch, each kiss existing in its own perfect moment, unhurried and complete. Later, as we lay side by side on the blanket, the afternoon sun warming our skin, Elijah traced the carved spiral on my necklace with his finger. It matches the pattern in the sand, he observed. I nodded, touching the smooth driftwood. My grandmother said it belonged to her mother, that it protects those who keep the old ways alive. His finger moved from the necklace to the hollow of my throat, a touch so gentle it might have been butterfly wings. Do you think we're keeping the old ways alive? With our dance? I think we're remembering them, I replied, bringing them back into the present. He smiled, leaning down to press a kiss to my forehead. I've decided to stay on Edisto, he said quietly, to extend my research here. Joy bloomed in my chest, warm and bright as the sun above us. You have? I called the research director this morning. The Beaufort position will go to someone else. His eyes met mine, serious despite his smile. I want to be where you are, Kiona, where we can explore this together. I reached up to touch his face, marveling at how quickly and completely he had become essential to me. I want that too. We stayed in the cove until late afternoon, swimming in the lagoon's clear water, lying in the sun, talking about our lives and dreams. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, we packed our things and followed the path back through the forest to the car. As we drove away from the parking area, Elijah took my hand. There's one more place I want to show you, if you're not too tired. I'm not tired at all, I assured him, feeling more energized than I had in months. He drove to the island's eastern end, where a boardwalk extended into the salt marsh separating Edisto from the neighboring Wadmalaw Island. We walked to the end, where a small covered platform offered a view across the marsh to the distant mainland. The sun was setting, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks that reflected off the water in countless tidal channels winding through grass. Birds waded in the shallows, egrets, herons, and ibis, searching for evening meals before settling for the night. This is where I come to think, Elijah said, leaning against the railing beside me. When I need to make decisions or work through problems, I understood why. The vista was breathtaking, wild and peaceful at once, a landscape shaped by constant conversation between land and water. Thank you for sharing it with me, I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. His arm encircled my waist, drawing me closer. I want to share everything with you, Kiona. The places I love, the things I discover, the questions I haven't yet answered. The simple honesty of his words moved me deeply. I turned in his arms, looking up into his face. I want that too. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the marsh, I felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. The past months had been a journey of discovery, of my heritage, of my gift, of my place in the world. And now, unexpectedly, that journey had brought me to Elijah, to this connection that felt both new and ancient, like a dance whose steps I somehow already knew. The carved spiral at my throat pulsed with warmth, a reminder of all who had come before us, who had loved on these shores, who had kept the old ways alive through generations. I thought of the old man on the beach, of his enigmatic smile and carved patterns in the sand. "Dance your truth," he had told me. And we had, creating something beautiful in the process. As darkness fell and the stars appeared above us, I knew our dance was just beginning, that the patterns we would create together were still forming, like spirals in sand that shifted and changed with each tide, but never truly disappeared. "We should head back," Elijah said, after comfortable silence. "Your grandmother will be wondering where you are." I smiled, knowing my grandmother was likely watching the clock but not worrying. She had seen what was growing between Elijah and me long before either of us fully realized it. "She'll want to hear about our dance," I said, as we walked hand in hand back along the boardwalk. "About how the sand responded to both of us." Elijah squeezed my hand. "Do you think she'll understand what it means?" I nodded, thinking of her words. Some people are meant to see our magic. Their souls recognize something in ours.